Let's get fired up.
What's absolutely clear is the recall will not make us safer.
San Francisco voted in a landslide last Tuesday to throw out of office Chesa Boudin, their self-proclaimed progressive prosecutor who was raised here in Chicago by a couple of 1960s radicals. But while Cook County's progressive prosecutor Kim Foxx got reelected here in 2020, Boudin was undone by voters fed up with violent crime in California and organized gangs of retail thieves, as well as Boudin's endorsement of ending cash bail, even for those accused of rape and murder. All that and more remain big issues here. Joining us to discuss, two of the smartest lawmakers in the Illinois state capitol. State Senator John Curran, a former longtime assistant Cook County state's attorney, and the chairman of the House Black Caucus, State Representative Cam Buckner, now also a candidate for mayor of Chicago. Let's get fired up. Republican candidates for governor and for General Assembly, Representative Buckner, have doubled down this week on their criticism of that Safety Act that you sponsored. A candidate for governor, Richard Irvin, said it should be called the Unsafety Act.
Yeah, Mike, I would bet my last dollar that candidate Irvin has not even read the Safety Act. The truth of the matter is it's very easy to criticize any piece of legislation. As I've said in the past, there is no perfect piece of legislation, but what we do have the chance to do is to perfect legislation to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do for the people in Illinois.
Which is what were you hoping when you sponsored it, in abolishing cash bail and all the other provisions of it? What were you hoping to achieve?
We were hoping to take a system that for a very long time had no justice for those who were victims of crime, and no justice for folks who lived in communities where these folks came from, to try to shift the paradigm. We want to make sure that we aggressively attack a system that treated you better if you were wealthy and guilty than it did if you were poor and innocent. And so, listen, there is still yet a lot of work to be done. This is not the end of the road. We want to make sure that we do all that we can to make sure that this and everything that we pass in Springfield makes the people in Illinois safe.
Well, a guy who's been saying that he hopes this isn't the end of the road is State Senator John Curran from Downers Grove, who's got a long list of proposals. Senator, what's at the top of the things you want to change when it comes to the Safety Act?
Well, Mike, it's the detention standards or lack thereof in the Safety Act. There is no magic to cash bail. The ability to pay a bond it has no correlation to whether or not someone poses a risk to the public safety. However, the act that was passed and is going to go into effect, that portion January 1st, has different detention standards at different points in a criminal proceeding. And initially you have the standard of posing a risk to public safety generally as a basis for a judge to detain an individual. However, that's only available on that initial detention hearing. Every subsequent court hearing after that, the judge must make a finding that an individual, that defendant poses a risk to a specific person and name that person. The community at large standard is nowhere in that act after that initial detention hearing.
Well, let me turn to Representative Buckner. So Representative Buckner, on that note, a carjacker who kills somebody in the carjacking, in the subsequent hearing, the prosecutors won't be able to point to somebody who might be carjacked, to some specific person, because the carjacker is out there just looking for anybody.
In that specific case, for a carjacker who commits a murder, this law gives the judges the ability to make sure that that person, no matter whether they're wealthy or insolvent, doesn't have the ability to have that second hearing as a free person. We put the parameters in there to give our judicial system the ability to make these determinations.
So, Mike, on that point, I disagree. It is there on that initial detention hearing. But after that initial detention hearing, the risk a defendant poses to the public at large is gone. It's an omission. It's not there. And at that point, the prosecutor has to identify and the judge has to find that you pose a risk to a particular individual to continue to detain that person at each and every subsequent court hearing. This is what the state's attorneys around this state have been warning us about. You get to the point where if an individual kills their wife, there is no one the prosecutor can point to in subsequent hearings that they pose a risk to. If an individual harms their wife, but does not kill their wife, you have the individual, and that person will be detained throughout the entire process. I realize these are extreme examples, but that's a pretty broad omission that needs to be addressed prior to this going into effect January 1. Or, we're going to have a lot of people that pose a significant risk to public safety walking around on some sort of release while they're going through the court system. And that's a dangerous situation.
So, Representative Buckner, let me ask you to respond to that, and then we'll move on to the next. I know there were other issues to address here.
Yeah, I think we are talking about the most extreme hypotheticals here and the most extreme examples. I do believe that if somebody committed a murder on a domestic partner or on their wife, that they are also still a threat to other people. And I would think that there are many judges in the state who feel the same way. Listen, I think Senator Curran and I agree on the fact that there are still things that we have to do to strengthen and improve this law and to make sure that the spirit of what we have tried to do is there.
Last year, more than 1,000 homicides in Cook County, an astounding number, a tragic number. How does the Safety Act, Representative Buckner, tackle that problem? The critics say that it's making things worse. Every Republican candidate for governor says that every day.
I want to remind folks that many and most pieces of the legislation have not gone into effect. So for folks to say that, once again, Mike, I think it's lazy logic. But what we have to do for sure is look at what we've done, right? And so there is the public security piece of it, which gives law enforcement a better tools to have a better fight when it comes to dealing with these things like carjackings and murder and the things that fall in that category. But it also has a strong, robust public safety component, right? And we talk about making sure that community groups and organizations on the ground who are actually doing the work to make sure that violence does not occur in the first place, that they have those resources.
Senator Curran, I know you're very skeptical about the impact of the Safety Act.
Mike, there's one component in the Safety Act that's gone into effect that is a concern, and that is an individual that's 2 days a week off of electronic monitoring if they're not detained, and that has gone into effect. That is a concern. However, what I want to highlight is really it's the changes the judiciary made in Cook County in 2018 under Chief Judge Evans that has significantly reformed the bail system in Cook County presently, and has lowered detention significantly and created a whole separate electrical monitoring program instead of incarcerate or detention without any really oversight. And Sheriff Dargett has spoken about this in great detail, the concerns of it. That's what's going on right now in Cook County and Chicago. And it's that system. It does still include some component of cash bail that's going to come statewide January 1, and that is a great concern. Cook County is really a separate issue that needs to be addressed, but we need to put the brakes on what's coming January 1st or commit to fixing it and having Republicans at the table in fixing it to make sure we get it right before it goes into effect. I think everyone understands cash bail is gone. But we need a broad detention standard, and judges need to have discretion, like they've modeled in New Jersey. The judges have great discretion there. They got rid of cash bail, but it's working. It's a safe model. That's what we need to work towards in fall veto.
I want to be very clear about this. The electronic monitoring system in Illinois has not been very effective, right? And so we have to come together and figure out how do we move the needle on this, right? It is a flawed system from the beginning. And so we got to do the work, right? Once again, we are not there yet. We still have work to do.
All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's take a look at the other side of this violence coin, the violence prevention programs that Governor Pritzker talks about when Republicans attack the Safety Act, those Republicans opposing him. We'll be right back after a quick break. When Governor Pritzker gets attacked for the criminal justice reforms that he signed into law in the Safety Act, he responds, Senator John Curran from Downers Grove, by citing violence prevention money. He says the violence interveners, the violence intervention people are critical to reducing the toll of bloodshed here. Do you agree?
Mike, that is one component of it. That it is a part of it. It is not the only solution. Republicans have voted to fund those violence prevention programs, that grant program that's running through the Department of Health and Services or Human Services. We voted to fund that. That is statewide in targeted communities. It's an important component, but it's only one component. The governor falls back on that as the only solution. Republicans say that that's just a piece of the solution, and this is a very complicated puzzle. So we can't just talk about that. We need to talk about all components here, including economic development, job training, and making sure all communities, everyone has access to health care. Those are all going to be components in this. But you know, we're a willing partner on violence prevention.
Representative Buckner?
I agree with that. I agree with Senator Curran. I think poverty and violence go hand in hand. So we have to look at this as an economic issue. What can we do to make sure that communities who have been neglected and disinvested in have the ability to create peace and safety for themselves, right? We look at the 793-day Bruce Rauner budget impasse, and we looked at the community groups and the organizations doing violence prevention work on the ground and how they were starved out. And we look at these numbers that we see right now, I think that there's a very clear correlation between those lack of resources and what's happening in the streets today.
Bruce Rauner left office almost 4 years ago. Why? And at the time he left, as you know, the level of violence and the murders were far below what it is now. Why do you think it's exploded so in the city and suburbs?
When you plant a seed, it does not grow immediately. It takes some time for us to see what the results are. When we look at the fact that this country really is under a collective mental health crisis, I think that we have to figure out how we change that. People are on edge. We see this going on across the country. But what I've always said, Mike, is that that's not a good enough excuse for us not to do anything. Illinois, Chicago doesn't need an example on how to get it right. We should be the example on how to get it right.
Senator Curran, why do you think there's been this explosion of violence?
I mean, there's been an explosion of violence. Going back to Governor Rauner, I mean, this is an old card that Governor Pritzker has continued to play. It's been 4 years. This is not about Governor Rauner. This explosion of violence, it really gets back to Mike. People need to feel safe in their communities. We need to support law enforcement. We need to make sure we have a fair but effective criminal justice system. And we need to detain the individuals that are wreaking havoc in communities.
You and I have talked on this program previously about those organized gangs that have attacked Oak Brook Mall, which I think is near where you have your law office and not that far from your home in Downers Grove. Are you happy with the steps that Representative Buckner referred to earlier about the organized retail theft, the steps being taken by Kwame Raoul and others against that?
No, I'm not happy about it. We started out with a very good bill that cast a broad net to have an efficient and streamlined prosecution of the entire organization. And through the process in Springfield, they got reduced down to now the only individual that can be charged under organized retail theft is the planner or the organizer of the whole criminal enterprise, not any other actors in the enterprise.
The purpose and the spirit of that bill, which I had the pleasure and the privilege of being the chief sponsor in the House on, was to make sure that we got the people on top, the people who were organizing these folks and putting them together. It's not helpful, or it doesn't make us more safe when we lock up a single mother who may be working for somebody else in an organized retail crime, that specifically if she is a victim of human trafficking and a lot of the things that we've seen as we looked at this situation. All
right, gentlemen, it sounds like there's some common ground here where the two of you might agree that perhaps in the veto session this fall or perhaps next year, some additional legislation would be moving through the General Assembly?
I think there is common ground, Mike, and I'll tell you, I will work side by side with John Curran any day of the week.
Mike, if we work together, we will get a better product. So if we're all at the table working collaboratively, the citizens of Illinois will all be better off. All
right. State Senator John Curran from Downers Grove, State Representative Cam Buckner, Democrat of Chicago, who's also a candidate for mayor. Thank you both for joining us. We'll be right back after a quick break.